A little bit about me. I don't really want to talk about me too much, but at least so you know who I am. That's yapping at you for the next few minutes. I've been in the industry since 2004. I was spent about 15 years at CubeSmart, held a bunch of different roles there. We turned the company around when we first got there in 2005, 2006, kind of coming through the very financial crisis. When I left there, I was running investments. I was wooed away by Blackstone after Blackstone acquired Simply, and I worked at Simply for a little bit more than 2 years here in Orlando until Blackstone's exit to public storage in 2023, excuse me. I'm at a smaller group now called Highline Storage Partners. We are a regional operator in the Southeast, 55, 60 assets, sponsored by a family office, utilize some third-party capital as well. And I kind of think about, the lessons that I've learned from scaling and strategies. And all I'm going to try and really do here is just think through and kind of tell you what I've learned, what I've thought, the way I have attacked things, and frankly, more importantly, probably where we've had foot faults in the past, and just try and instill a little bit of thought for what I've gone through in the past. That said, also I'll be working one of the roundtables that Chris mentioned this afternoon. So to the extent you have some questions, we can certainly dive into any of that stuff right this afternoon. And it may be easier if you want to do kind of some one-on-one stuff versus talking through here. That said, if something pops up and you really want to talk about it, obviously raise your hand. I most certainly don't want to preach for the next 30 minutes because that sounds awful. So here's who I am. That's what I've been. Scale requires nimbleness, adjustments. I think that, we all want to grow. Stagnancy is boring. So, talked about, I've done a fair amount of transactions, fair amount of growing the business, but wins are good. We want to really focus on how we can maximize our win potential, maximize our opportunities for success. I think I want to talk about what this isn't, and I hate saying this word. It's not a sermon. This is not me up here telling you, here's all the things that are great, here's all the things that you shouldn't be doing. It's not a brag. I don't think I'm any better than anybody else. We're all trying to do the same thing, right? We're all trying to find good deals. We're all trying to maximize revenue and cash flow and create cash flow streams here for ourselves or for our families going forward. And obviously do well by our investors. So in my mind, we're all in this together, and we're all thinking about it the same way. So if I can try and help one of you that has a problem that you haven't been able to figure out yet, or change your mentality of thinking just a little bit, I think there's going to be a lot of value there. And that's really my focus. The most important thing, this is not an exciting slide deck. There are no, monkeys coming across playing tambourines or anything. It's a bunch of boring words on a page. It's intentional. I think that, you're stuck with me holding this thing for the next 30 minutes or so. So I want to really try and focus on what we're talking about versus, kind of the words that are up on the screen. And again, I encourage take notes, make sure we talk about stuff later. The biggest thing for me is I really want to focus on what are some of the things that I wish folks would have told me, right? Especially what, I know why I think about it is my time at CubeSmart, again, we kind of fixed the organization, got them working correctly. My time at Simply, we were able to really learn what a private equity firm was thinking and really be able to manage a portfolio that way. And really at Highline now and kind of having the opportunity to bring them both together. So I think I can give you some pretty good perspective across the board. The one thing I want you to think about most as we're thinking about this and we're thinking about scaling our portfolios, right? And, don't need to answer this, but I will say, if there's a problem at one of your stores, who's the first call? Is it you? Is it you every time? And if it is, I hope some of this starts to resonate because, at some point we're going to start changing our mentality of being an operator of a self-storage facility to being a CEO of the business, right? And you don't want to be that first call every single time. But you need to make sure you have the systems and the processes in place to know what's going on so you can be able to manage the things from wherever you are. So things are going great, right? Cash flow is performing well, you're within your pro forma. What's your first instinct? Is it always going to be to grow? And I think that generally the answer is yeah. We always prefer to grow versus taking a step back and systemized. And what I will tell you, coming from a portfolio on 2 different occasions now that has been grown without systemization, the fixes that you have to put in place after you've grown are much more costly and take away so much more efficiency than if you can do it on the front end. So the biggest thing that I'm going to try and instill the whole way through here is you don't need to grow too fast. The deals are going to be there, I promise. But when you put the systems in place to be able to manage what you're trying to do, that's going to be, I think, where you're going to be able to maximize your opportunities for success. Think about the issues that you have when you're building your business. Are you having the same problems over and over? Are you putting out fire? Are you playing defense versus playing offense? When you have the same problem over and over again, that's more of a system issue that you didn't take a step back and think about how do you fix that problem so that you don't need to you don't need to create that solution over and over again. Build your playbook. We all have a playbook. And I think one of the best things that we have in this room is each other, right? Because I can almost promise you, whatever problem you're running into at your property right now, somebody else in this room is probably all you're running into. Ask the questions. And I do it. Sorry, I touched my lavalier. I'm not supposed to do that. I apologize. I do that, right? I have folks within the industry that I talk to as well. Some have larger portfolios, some have smaller portfolios, but man, we're not the first ones to try and figure out these issues. We want to do fun stuff, right? We don't want all the boring stuff to get in the way. But there's a fine line because some of that boring stuff that we have to do is that process creation, right? And I know out there, I love red tape, right? I hate red tape. It's so annoying. It's one of the biggest complaints I had when I was at Blackstone because there was 187 levels of red tape. And at some point, we all know when it's a good deal, you just want to go buy it, right? What I will say I learned from that is some level of red tape is actually okay. Putting some systems, putting some checks in place to avoid you having to be able to go too fast, having some ability for you to step back on the deal and think and say, did I think about X? Did I think about Y? Do I know the market well enough? I think all those things are really important, and I would encourage you to think about that. And again, I mentioned earlier, avoid the operator trap. What do you want to be? If you want to be an operator that operates a self-storage facility or operates two self-storage facilities, there is nothing wrong with that, right? But if we're trying to really try and elevate your game, you want to think about yourself more as a CEO running a business. And that business has multiple investments, and you're trying to manage all of this. All right. There's a lot of talk about AI in this world, right? And I will tell you that we use AI and we have a ton of dashboards and all that kind of fun stuff. Technology isn't everything. It's still a people business, right? We're still serving a customer. That customer is a human being. That human being has a need. We're still serving an investor. That investor has a return requirement. We're trying to maximize how we can, help the customer's needs, but also maximize how we can create that investment return for our investor. We'll talk a little bit about culture, talk a little bit about people. There's a concept that I think about all the time. Culture and work ethic trump availability every time. It is so easy to say, I have downtime at my property. Whoever the first guy or gal is that walks through the door, I'm just going to hire them. And there's such a trap there that occurs because if that person doesn't align with your culture, doesn't align with your brand, doesn't align with your moral compass, then all that you're doing is you're just putting up customers into the future. So, don't fill that seat too fast. Ask yourself the question, would I trust that person to represent my brand if I'm not there? Because at the end of the day, like it or not, that person is an extension of you and an extension of the ideals that you're trying to put in place for your customers. I don't have a full appreciation for the size of the portfolio, so I'll touch on just the regional manager concept. When do you get that first regional manager? When do you take that larger step back from the day-to-day operational perspective? Man, that decision's hard. And I wish I could say, oh, here's the math problem. It's once you hit this point. It's not. The best thing I can tell you, obviously, is, scaling helps, and we'll talk about that in terms of acquisitions. But at the end of the day, hire into that pain. It's going to be a little uncomfortable. It's that when you take your chair and you teeter it back just a little bit and that chair's teetering, that's probably the time when you need that. If you feel that you're so overwhelmed that you just can't get anything done, and then you start the process of hiring that regional manager, man, you're putting yourself so far behind. So it may feel like you're shooting yourself in the foot a little bit, so do it ahead of time. But I can tell you from experience, to get the right person in place and get them in there a little bit early, it's going to allow you the path to go back to doing the fun things, And again, a little bit of red tape sometimes goes a long way. The last thing I'll say as it relates to the regional manager, and I think this probably works for all of your employees as well. How much are you checking in with your employees? Do you guys have scheduled time to speak with them? Do you do a 30-day check-in? Do you do a 60-day check-in? Do you do a 90-day check-in? What's your onboarding process like? Your onboarding is their reflection of how you deem that human or that individual. You want them to feel good about your job. You want to be able to have a strong conversation, and you want to be able to check back in with them later when stuff isn't working properly. Because let's face it, sorry. Oh my God, this is annoying. Let's face it, things aren't going to work right all the time, right? And when they're not, are you going to get good feedback? Are they going to give you the things that you need to hear in order to be able to make the correct decision to try and fix the problem? I think it's incredibly important. I talked to guys a little bit earlier. I'm a huge proponent of AI. I'm a huge proponent of data. I'm a huge proponent of systems and all that kind of stuff. And forgive my French, they don't mean anything if you don't have the right people that are using them and don't know how to use them. And again, your brand might be different from your brand or different from your brand, and that's fine. But you want to define what that is to make sure that the folks that you're hiring into can align with that, and therefore maximize your brand strategy, which then maximizes your ability to be able to create your returns. So what actually moves the needle? Create different management. Do we all have different management platforms? We joke around internally. It's do you understand your debits and credits? Do you know where your cash is going within your P&L? And it's not just the revenue side. Where are you bleeding out? Where are you bleeding out on discounts? Are you maximizing that the right way? How is your expenses running? Right? They seem like really, really simple questions, but you should know those pat. And when you start to hire folks, your expectation is that they should know them down pat as well. And it's incumbent upon you to train them, because it's I joke around. It's like fighting with your spouse. Excuse me. If you don't tell me, I don't know. I can't tell you how many times that we've had conversations with an employee and their employees saying, I didn't realize that's what you were expecting from me. That's what I was realizing. I didn't know that that's what you wanted. Make your expectations clear, make them consistent, and create opportunities for yourself to continue to check in. We'll talk about it a little bit further, but technology is awesome. Good technology makes good people be better. Good technology with bad people makes bad decisions. So again, I know it's almost counterintuitive to what we talk about in this because everything's AI. You want to focus on the right people and the right time. Let's talk about marketing a little bit. You know what? I want to go back to that. I want to talk about systems a little more. I think that in this age of AI, we are hearing more and more about this system does this system does that. The one thing I will caution you with, none of us are really big enough, I think, to be able to build all of our own systems, right? So we need to rely on vendors to be able to help us with that. The questions that we ask all the time: does it reduce cost? Does it rent a unit? Or does it drive rate? If your vendor that you're talking to can't answer one of those three questions, my recommendation, don't talk to them. You're wasting your time, right? Those are the things that you need to be able to decrease that a lot. And if you can't do those, what's that vendor going to get? Market visibility. What makes your 10 by 10 better than your competitors? And for the most part, it's nothing, right? I roll up door is no different than your roll up door. It's just location at that point and customer convenience and access, right? How does the customer feel when they get on the site? And how easy is it for them to be able to get to that site? Know how your property is versus your competitors. And I will tell you, know it in a way that you would put everybody else in your market to shame. Be obsessive about all the information. We have a I think it's a movie. It's an old movie. When the phone's not ringing, it's me not calling. Think about why the phone's not ringing. Think about why those leads aren't coming in. Is your marketing up to stuff where it needs to be? Is your telephone number correct? Have you gone on your own website? Have you gone to Google? Have you gone to all the basic steps to make sure that when a customer is trying to find you, they can find you? Or is it a public store about 6 miles away? That's the top click, and they're taking all of your customer traffic. And you may not be able to work around that. So what's the plan B? We'll talk about it in a little bit, but we have the opportunity in our world, because we're smaller, to be nimble. I've been on the cruise ship that's trying to make a left-hand turn, and it takes 18 different levels of approval to do that. No, nimbleness is opportunity, and that's what we have as being smaller operators. And I'll tell you, I'm at 60. Sorry, I questioned you. I'm at 60, and I still think that I'm nimble compared to what I've been at the past. So there is a room to grow to be able to be nimble. Part of that nimbleness, which I believe is a word, comes from, again, putting the right people in place and entrusting them to be able to make the decisions, but making sure that they understand your vision and they are carrying your vision forward. Reporting and data. It's garbage in, garbage out, right? If you don't have good data that you're using to make your decisions, then you're going to make bad decisions. Spend the time, get the right people to put your data in a place that you can manage it. But the gentleman with the red shirt, whose name I didn't catch, and I apologize, I was thinking about this exactly when you were talking about your acquisition process, right? You had a guy that's scraping that data. He's getting it, and it may not be the actual intent, but he's taking that data, he's getting it into a consistent format, which then gets uploaded to your CRM, so then your caller is out there and has the most efficient way to be able to just go right down this list and make his calls. And then from there, there's probably multiple offshoots, and one of those is it goes to your inbox and you say, here's a hot lead, I need to run with it, right? If that's choppy anywhere in that process, the inefficiency just starts to compound upon itself, right? So I think that's a perfect example of building a process, building a system, and being able to use something and make it scalable. Because you can continue to grow that from 1 state to 2 states to 5 states to 10 states. And at that point, all you're doing is adding the right person, I would suspect, in seats to be able to cover more research, cover more calls. And then eventually, at some point, you have someone making calls for you because you're out doing more fun stuff. And then execution, I've talked about this a little bit, but local knowledge, nimbleness is outperformance. You have better local knowledge than most of the large operators in your markets. I've been the large operator, I know it. Be nimble, lean into that advantage. There are certainly opportunities to do it. Mm-hmm. All right, we buy assets, not spreadsheets. I love a good spreadsheet. I'm almost an accounting major from Penn State, with 6 credits away because I love a good spreadsheet. We buy real estate, right? You can make the spreadsheet be whatever you want it to be. But you need to be honest with yourself about the assumptions that you're putting in, understanding every single line, and you need to understand what the larger market is across the board. Oh no, lost myself here. Sorry, lost myself. Think about the deals that you've bought in the past. Do you have a playbook for that type of acquisition strategy? Buying a stable deal is very different than buying a deal that's 1 year into lease up, versus buying a deal that has an expansion opportunity in the back, right? If you've done those different types of deals in the past, take the time, lay out what that process is, lay out your underwriting assumptions. Hey, I can lean in harder on rate here because of X, or I understand Y, right? I think if you do that, you're creating that playbook, you're creating that systemization so that you know at some point you're not going to be underwriting every single deal, or you're going to want to have someone else run it and have you become the screener of that deal. And you want to make sure you're thinking about it the way that you are, because again, if you don't tell me, I don't know. Diligence, everything. I didn't realize when I was at CubeSmart how good I had it when I was trying to do due diligence. When I started, we had 350 properties. When I left, we had 1,200 under management. Man, that's not that hard of diligence stuff, right? I know the market. I had 17 properties in the greater Fort Lauderdale market. When I bought my 18th, I knew the market better than everybody else did already. You're going to get that over time as you create your scale. But until you do, you need to know everything. You need to know your competitor rates. You need to know their access. You need to know their marketing plans. You need to know supply. The single most important thing that's going to mess up your business plan is supply. The second most likely is a bad hire. But supply, supply, supply. Dave's shaking his head in the back because he knows I've said it to him before. Supply is the absolute most important thing. Be obsessive about understanding the supply in your market. Be even more obsessive when you're underwriting a new deal. I don't do it enough, so I'm telling you from experience, when you mess up on this, it will mess up everything on your entire. And the last thing is, when you're diligencing a deal, bad news, problems, they don't get better with age, right? If you see a bad roof, man, you got to tack that bad roof head on. If you see water ponding in the back corner and you can't quite figure out why, don't say, we'll figure it out later. You need to figure that stuff out during diligence. If that means elongating the deal, then you elongate the deal. I will tell you, I don't say this very often, some of the best deals I did are the deals I didn't do, because it was that type of reason. Hey, there's a, I can picture the property right now. There was a structural issue with the property. We could not get our head around it during due diligence, and we had to want it. Somebody bought it 2 years later, and it was a $2.5 million fix. That's a hurt you, right? So be really, really focused and dial it in on what you're trying to do, what you're buying, the asset that you're buying, and make sure all that's incorporated appropriate into your business plan. All right, value promoters, value detractors. I think we all know this, but I think it's worth saying as well. We are a scale business, right? So, there's a balance, right? But to buy one more property in your market, you certainly can accelerate your scale, and you have the ability to be able to increase your margins because you can have some economies, right? You can't buy everything through market. At some point, you need to expand out. So again, be smart. Make sure you're not overstructuring yourself. Go back to the conversation on the regional manager. If you're buying that one property, you have 3 in one market, and you're about to buy 1 in a different market. Is that the time that you want to bring on a regional? It may feel like it's early. It may feel like you're not going to be doing enough. But you don't want to get yourself stuck where all that you're doing is just managing back and forth and not actually able to be productive. Your time is your most valuable resource. And where you're allocating your time is going to be directly dependent upon your ability to be able to succeed and perform. This is one of the biggest things I've learned. When I was at Cube, we were a REIT, are a REIT, they are a REIT. I'm not quite sure how to conjugate that verb properly. When I went to Simply, we were managed by a single LP for all deals, right? Deals, fees, all of that really didn't matter to me at all. Where I'm at now, we have a family office, we have third-party capital as well. Aligning your deal to the appropriate capital partner is very, very important, because if you align the right deal to the wrong capital partner, even if you perform properly, you're probably going to create more work for yourself. And then the last thing I'll say as it relates to just the fee streams is just be honest with yourself. Because let's be honest, there are some deals that you buy where you're like, man, this is a good deal, and I think we're going to create long-term value, and everyone's going to win, and that's awesome. And there are other deals you buy where like, you know what, this is kind of a steady Eddie. It's kind of hard to mess up. I'm not really going to make a whole lot, but it's a pretty good fee stream, and that's okay. Make sure you're honest with yourself on what that business plan is on the front end so you can align your capital to that as well. You might have capital that just says, I don't care, I'm going to get my 6% return, and that's fine. That's great. That's a good fee deal for you, But it isn't like you're going to take that thing from a 4% return to a 9. It's just going to hum along in a 6 the whole time. So, think about when you're aligning your capital, be very honest with yourself, and challenge your assumptions along the way so that you understand what you actually are buying, and make sure your capital aligns to it. Brand culture. Again, I know I'm going fast, so if we miss anything or you want to dive into something, raise your hand, throw something at me, or we can certainly talk about it later this afternoon. Someone said to me a long time ago, with a marketing out as a Q, your brand is what happens when you're not watching, right? It sounds great when you put it on paper. Are you training the folks the right way to be able to do what you need them to do so that they can do it out there? The expectation of your customer versus your expectation. It's really hard when you've owned a property for a while to not see what the customer sees when they pull up for the first time, right? Almost 50% of our customers are first-time users of the product, right? So I will challenge you, take a step back every 4 months, 6 months, and just fresh set of eyes. Hey, does that curb need to be painted? Is the awning starting to fade a little bit? You don't want to put the money in if you don't have to. But if it looks dingy for the customer for the first time when they walk in, they're going to be questioning the security and the safety of your property. If your manager isn't saying to you, hey, I think we need to focus on fixing this curb or this bollard's been knocked down, how much do they care about the property? And indirectly, that's a reflection upon you. So you want to make sure, again, we have the right people on the seats on the bus, and how are we making those decisions to be able to maximize and not get in the customer's way so that when the customer gets in, they're not turning around, right? And I think we've all seen a customer pull in with the U-Haul, see that the customer, see the property, obviously not many of our properties, they see a property is not the most pleasant one and turn around and drive down the street. There are other options. I mean, back to what makes my 10 by 10 better than your 10 by 10. The culture is what protects your brand. The way you manage culture, going back to some of the earlier conversations, the way you manage culture is your discussions with your people. It's the check-ins. It's the hard and the direct conversations. You don't need to be a jerk, but you need to be able to call them out if they say, hey, look, I had 3 reservations that didn't get closed. Or you need to be able to have your manager or your regional manager say, why are you not following up on these things? These are things that have to get done. Make sure that the regional manager understands your expectations.
What's been your best filter for culture?
Man, that's a great question. It's a really good question.
I feel like when I interview people, I feel like I can, like if it were me, I know how to BS my way through a test, right? So I'm always, my alert's always up for people. Like, I feel like I have a good gut intuition, but I also know if it were me on the flip side of that interview, I could BS my way through it if I needed to. So I'm just trying to.
Yeah, it's a really good question. We inherently have a desire to hire the person when you're interviewing them, which is the person that you want to go have a beer with, right? You inevitably want to hire somebody that's very similar to you, right? So you have to fight that urge. It's a really hard urge to fight. So I would say that's the one, is I sit there and say, if I just like, man, this person seems cool, I really want to go down to the bar and have a beer with them, I start questioning myself, am I focusing on the person or am I focusing on their skill sets, right? So that's one. And then the other one that I've run into that I think helps me, and this is probably more a me thing versus a larger thing. I've determined that I can lead a team better. It sounds silly. I try and hire prior athletes. Usually team sports are Aikido. And what that tells me is they want to win, so they're competitive, right? They understand rules, and they work well in a team. So that's my hiring secret, so y'all now know it. But I had to staff an entire team at Simply, and I had 3/4 of that team were athletes, were actually college athletes. So it wasn't trying to be that way, but I learned that I aligned my vision of success better aligned with their vision of success that I was able to figure out during the hiring process. But again, you still need to go back to, do I want to have a beer with this guy? If the answer is yes, do you want to question a little bit more? And the last thing I'll tell you, at the end of the day, especially on hiring, man, you still got to trust your instincts. Right? If something tells you you're getting bullshitted, just bolt. There's other people out there. Just like there's going to be other deals that are out there, it's not worth it. Because again, that hire, if you get trapped and you make that bad hire, the value deterioration that you're probably going to deal with from trying to get that person out and then have to get that next person in is going to be far greater than if that facility is down a person or you're down a regional for another 2 or 3 weeks. So hopefully that's helpful. Awesome. Yeah, don't wait to make hard decisions. That's kind of ties into what I was just saying. No, bad doesn't get better with age. When you know the first COO that I had when I was at CubeSmart, which was still U-Store at the time, he got this little placard on his desk that said, "It's the manager," right? And his thesis on that was, if it's going really well, the manager's doing great. If it's not going well, the manager's not great. But at the end of the day, if you're seeing trouble at your property, the first decision you probably need to make is your manager. And the longer that goes, the harder it gets to do. And look, back to, I want to have a beer with this guy. At some point, there's a fine line where you want to be able to be friendly with the person and you want to be empathetic towards what they're doing, but they still have a job to do, right? Y'all have a 2-week contract, right? You do your job. After 2 weeks, I pay you, and we rinse and repeat until something breaks in that cycle. That's how I can come at it. But again, not saying that I don't care about the people individually, and I think that we need to do a lot for them. But at the end of the day, they're not there to be your friends. They're there to maintain your asset and be able to grow and execute the business plan that you laid out in front of them. More scallions, more focus. Again, back to acquisitions sound awesome. I know we all want to do deals because deals are the fun part. But recognize that as you have more deals, you're getting pulled in more places and you're getting pulled in to ask more questions faster. Do you have the scale in place to be able to manage all that? Do you have the people in place to be able to execute the plan that you put in place? And at some point, back to my prior comment, where you say, I'm going from kind of an operator to more of the CBO. When you think about what a CEO does every day, a good chunk of their day is messaging, right? They're talking to their people. They're getting a pulse on the business. They're asking probing questions, not trick questions, but they're asking probing questions to understand where they should be focusing their time. Where's the puck going? If you're constantly focusing on trying to get the puck out of the corner, you're not going to be nearly as productive as being able to skate towards where you think the next opportunity is going to be. So who are you? Delegation's hard. I'll be honest, I suck at it. It's a constant fight for me. I'm not good at when I know there's a problem and it's a 10-minute fix for me, teaching somebody how to fix it because it's a 20-minute opportunity for them to do it because I can just get it done. It's a complete open, please keep this down. It's a complete blind spot for me, and I focus on it all the time. So I'll challenge you to think about who you are, think about how you can delegate, think about how you can. Don't think about it as letting go. Think about it as passing the baton. You have the same message. You're just asking that next person to go forward with it. But make sure you have those traps in place to be able to review what they're doing. Because again, you give them too much rope, and all of a sudden, how do you fix that mistake? And that just takes time. And the last thing I'll tell you, the seat at the top can be lonely. It's hard, right? Again, this room is helpful. We have a room of 30, 40, 45 people in here, and you have the opportunity to be able to ask each other what you're doing each time. Ask for the advice. Crave the advice. Ask for feedback. The most important thing about feedback is make sure you are mentally ready to accept it. Because if I ask you how I'm doing, and Chris says you're doing a shitty job because he just ran over because we're already over, and I don't want to hear that, well, now I'm just mad at Chris. And that's not fair because I've asked Chris for his advice. And he's taken time to give it to me, so I need to make sure that I'm in a good position to be able to listen. So my biggest lessons, as I wrap up, now that I'm only a few minutes late, but I'm doing all right, I think, systemize before you scale. It's not fun. It's not sexy, right? I think the boring work of documentation, being accountable, and standardization is what directly leads into success. So do the boring stuff first, and you're going to set yourself up for success. Invest in people over technology. I think I've taught that one to death, that the right person is the right answer and the wrong person is an awful answer. We've all made the mistakes, and we're going to continue to make the mistakes. So when you make the mistake, fix it fast. Don't let it continue to carry on. And then the last thing I'll say is stay disciplined. Again, sometimes the best deal you do is the one that you did. Don't go over your skis too hard too fast. If your portfolio is a bunch of 25 to 40,000 square foot facilities, your next die should not be a 115,000 square foot facility, right? If you're in Des Moines, Iowa, we shouldn't be going to Bronx, New York. Nothing wrong with that. There's plenty of opportunities in Des Moines. And I know it sounds silly and it sounds simple, but in many cases, and I'm obviously, accentuating this, but in many cases, you get that deal where, again, it's back to that chair is teetering a little bit. And how comfortable are you? And if you're feeling a little more uncomfortable than you are being honest with yourself, that may not be the best deal for you. And that's okay, because there's going to be another one. And you'll have a much worse reaction if you buy that one and get yourself completely over your skis, because of all the hard work that you've done, and the rest of your portfolio is going to start to suffer because you're not being able to allocate adequate time to each of those properties that need it. I'll leave you with the operators who scale well. I don't need to read you. You guys are quite literate, I'm sure. But that's, do the unsexy stuff. You do the unsexy stuff and the fun stuff comes with it. Thank you. Okay, let's stop.
So good. Before we let you go, does anyone have a couple questions? Kenny.
Can you mentioned supply earlier, right? I think we learned from deals that went well, but maybe didn't go as expected. So can you talk about maybe some deals that you guys selling in the past that did not go as expected and why? Like any insight?
Yeah. Supply is obviously the easiest one. Supply. I will tell you, the misreading the market. So not understanding not understanding there's a natural barrier, i.e. there's the other side of the tracks, right? And I focus on it more now, but from some lesson learned, I map out where customers come from on every single deal that I buy. So I will ask for a copy of the rent roll. I will ask for a copy, you can redact the names if we're not under contract yet. And I will map out through Google Maps where all those customers are coming from. I understand what the comps are, where those customers are coming from. I rely on those comps more when I'm trying to figure out what I think pricing is, but I understand what my customer wants, right? And then secondly, behind that, what does the customer want? I try to understand when I'm looking at that competitive set now, right? What do I have that they don't, right? And how can I lean into that? Or what do they have that I could do, right? To be able to try and maximize a return somehow. And then the last one I'll say, again, it goes without saying, real estate taxes. Got my teeth kicked in a handful of times on taxes where it was great deal and I just mixed it. Happens sometimes. So the more you can do on the front end on the tax side, it's the biggest number on your P&L. It sometimes has the most variability, unfortunately. That's going to give you the opportunity to for success or failure.
Can you go deeper on what happens?
Sucked. The short answer on it was we hit our business plan from a revenue perspective, right? And the majority of the gains that we generated in revenue were absorbed in the real estate tax increase that we didn't think we were going to get. Reassessed. Yeah. It was that for this property specifically was in Houston, and it was built. And when we reviewed the taxes on it, we thought that the property was fully assessed by the county, and it was a partial construction assessment. So, and we missed it, and our tax consultant missed it too. So when the property got reassessed, our taxes went from, I thought they were going to go from X to Y, and they went from X to Z. So I was just digging out of a hole on that asset for a long time. Now it's a little bit different when you're at a REIT because it's one property out of 400, so you really don't directly see it. But I mean that was a hard one because took us 4 extra years to be able to achieve the NOI return that we thought we were going to get because all the initial gains that we thought were absorbed by that tax increase.
So you've been obviously with very large fires and then regional fires. So someone like me who's smaller of a building, a regional portfolio, are there certain sizes if I'm looking to plan an exit down the road, certain size portfolios or certain size facilities that come under the vest radar for somebody like yourself, a larger player?
Yeah, I would say for me, and I'm probably a little bit snooty when I say this, so I apologize. Less than 30,000 square feet from a property size is not very exciting for me. I think it's really hard to maximize economies of scale and do you get the appropriate flow through on your revenue when the deal is that small. Now you can use technology to fix that. You can go from an unmanned or a hub and spoke model and perhaps that winds up helping. But if you have a single, 30,000 square foot facility and nothing else within 100 miles, it's a hard way, right? I think about that deal specifically as a value detraction versus a value addition when I'm looking at a portfolio.
Okay.
As far as size of the portfolio goes, it's really hard to say because some of it just depends on the quality in the market. We are now buying, I would say, secondary, tertiary properties. My sweet spot probably is 35 to 60 million. I put an LOI out on a deal yesterday for $5 million. So we don't have a problem going small, but when you think about what's the appropriate amount of capital deployment, 35 to 60 in terms of lining up equity, being able to maximize or spread your debt costs over a larger investment, but have it be meaningful check size to the investor, probably somewhere in that range. Okay. What I will tell you in the market we're in now, and Dave's probably better at this time, in the market that we're in now, once you get north of about $100 million, maybe $75 to $100 million, your buyer profile has to start to change, right? And it becomes a bit more of an institutional deal. And then it gets into, okay, well, they're going to focus a lot more on do they like the market, as much as do they like the assets, because at that point it becomes a much larger check size for them. And they need to sell it to somebody probably in New York that's never seen a self-storage job in their life.
So we have some 20,000 square foot properties in close to what I would say a region, 25 minutes apart, close to the extension. So then a logic may be right that it would be best to expand that over to 30,000 square foot mark first, and then kind of grow from there in that market, as opposed to maybe spending money on a smaller facility, better off getting these to be more of a REIT or regional operator
Totally.
purchasable.
Totally. And part of this now, this comes into your, this is probably not very, very specific to this deal, but like, depending on what your exit would be on that, right? And your plan is, like, the perfect thing you do there, you take a 20,000 square foot facility, you run it at 94% occupancy for, you know, the better part of 12 months. And then you do the expansion, right? And then you run that expansion for about 6 months. And that's probably the time to sell it at that point. Dave might say I'm wrong, but I think I'm right. We've done this once. Because what you can do is you can show the buyer pool that the demand is there because the property maintained that high level of occupancy. And now at that point you can sell the drink. And you probably can maximize until the opportunity, because you still have a risk there to be able to know, can the markets digest that additional supply that you just put on the market. But you have the history to be able to say, well, certainly it was there. I just bought a deal like this in Dallas. That was the exact story. And it sold very, very nicely from a buyer perspective. But again, you may want cash flow. And if that's the case, you want to build it up and let it run for a while. And then when you determine you exit. But if you're trying to time your exit, I think that's probably your best time to do it.
Okay, so awesome.
Okay.